Well, hello everyone. This is Fadi, and I want to welcome you back to the second part of our live stream marathon. We have another special guest that will join me shortly. But just to recap what we have done so far, yesterday, we've done three live streams back to back. Each one of them, of course, was two parts because we tried to accommodate for the airtime from my radio podcast called Let Us Reason. The first one was with both Brother Nasser, former Muslim from Saudi Arabia, and our dear sister, Daughter of Christ, both whom I had on my channel before, shared the testimony, and also I had them join me to discuss different topics. The second hour of our live stream marathon yesterday also was two parts with Brother Anthony Rogers, who did a beautiful job discussing the Christology of the Gospel of Mark, a very important topic. It was a teaser for something that he and I will do here in our studio together, a multi-videos, obviously, to discuss the Christology of Mark, and hopefully later we can dive into the Christology of Luke and then the Christology of Matthew. The idea is that we want to teach our brothers and sisters how they can defend the deity of Christ, not just from the Gospel of John, but also from the Synoptic Gospels, and especially from Mark, that many believe to be the early, traditionally speaking, the earliest out of all the Gospels. And Muslims, of course, jump all over Mark, thinking that somehow Mark does not present Jesus as divine, and only John will present him divine. And then they will make these, outrageous claims that there has been an evolution in terms of how the divinity of Christ was presented if you start from Mark and you get all the way to John. Of course, yesterday in just the 1 hour, we were able to debunk that just by looking at a couple of parts of the Gospel of Mark, the prologue of Mark, and also another section from chapter 6, verses 45 to 52, where Jesus walked on water and calmed the storm. And I added later also Mark chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. All that to say is that was a teaser just to show you that Mark is impregnated with so many information concerning the divinity of Christ, especially from the Old Testament, and that ties beautifully to Exodus chapter 23, also ties into Judges chapter 2, also ties into Isaiah's chapters 42 to 55, and the list can go on and on and on. So all that to say is we were able in 1 hour to refute these bogus claims. And then in the third hours, we had a questionable character called David Wood, no, just kidding, who has been definitely preoccupied by his own, personal life in terms of taking care of his kids, because apparently there are shortages of available nurses. And many of you know, of course, that David had two of his sons, 10 and 13, that really need medical assistance, and always lift him up in prayer, and also consider supporting the brother and taking care of his needs, because these are not easy. And obviously he has been spending time to take care of his family, which is, of course, has to be first and foremost before anything else. So many of you have been asking about where is David. That's what David is doing, taking care of those most important needs and his precious kids. So we definitely were blessed to have him with us for the last hour of our marathon. And right before this particular hour, we had another hour with our dear brother, Dr. J. Smith, also two parts, where we talked about where we were in terms of the data that we've been uncovering that refutes the holes in the Islamic narrative, and then where we're going. So the title was Where We Were and Where We're Going, meaning the additional material that we will begin to unpack together, he and I here in studio, but also he's going to start doing these video teasers on his own channel, Founder Films. Well, today, right this minute, we have another live stream. It will be half an hour only with this particular guest, simply because he has some other commitments, and we do not want, of course, to get in the way of him meeting this commitment that will be immediately after our live stream. With us in studio, our dear brother Mel. Brother Mel, I want to welcome you to our live stream. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to do this. And also thank you for your amazing research and the absolutely amazing information that you are sharing with us, which is an eye-opener in and of itself. Now, I haven't shared yet the title. Why don't you go ahead and share the title with people right now?
Hi, Al. It's great to be back, and thank you for welcoming me back onto the show again. It's great. So the title today is the story of Muhammad historical or is it fictional? And in today's presentation, I'm going to present the fact that it is a mythology. And we can tell it's a mythology by looking at the structure of this story that all of the audience, I'm sure, is familiar with. And to show that, I'm going to be looking at Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which is a work that he had done decades ago. He analyzed hundreds of different mythologies and found some common elements in all of these stories. Now, a number of years ago, I had the pleasure of being mentored by a screenwriter who was interested in a story that I had, and he taught me the basics of how to write a screenplay. So I had a go at it, and I spent a long time trying to put together a screenplay. And the difficulty was that when you have a historical story and you try and turn it into essentially a mythology, it is very difficult because everyday life is very messy. Things don't fall neatly into different categories. And so the only way I was able to actually make a workable story was I had to adapt the story and make it a fiction in order to make it work. And even then, it was really difficult. And if any of the elements were wrong, it wasn't just a question of editing the screenplay. You had to start from scratch and get all the elements to work in unison in order to have a good story. So on slide 1 there, you may see the
So you're going to start
kind of like a diagram
right
of Joseph.
See, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a diagram of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and it's broken up into 4 parts. There's a call to adventure, there is a supreme ordeal, and then there is a transformation, and there's a road back, the hero's return. And in most stories, you find these elements, and you'll be familiar with the elements of this in most movies. If you go to a good movie and you feel that it was a really satisfying story, the reason is because it follows these key elements. And if some of the elements are not there, or if they're in the wrong order, the story feels flat. So I thought today it'd be interesting to look at Ibn Ishaq's and Ibn Hisham's biography of Muhammad to see whether it looks like a history or whether it looks like a mythology. And the conclusion I'm going to be drawing is actually it looks very much like a mythology.
Right.
So what I would like to do is compare it to Lord of the Rings, and we're going to see each of the elements of the hero story. We're going to look at Lord of the Rings, and then we're going to look at the story of Muhammad. And I think it's going to be really obvious to all of you that Muhammad's story is very much a mythology.
And Mil, just before you continue with this, what prompted you to begin to look into these directions, if you don't mind sharing with people? Because sometimes they wonder, well, why are you doing this, and are you trying to invent a myth yourself? What prompted you to go in that direction, which is, the right way to do it, of course.
Yeah, well, it started off with me assuming that the story was correct and it was historical. But as I started to do research, I discovered there was lots of holes in the standard narrative, as they say. And basically, the historical road diverted massively from the story that we're told. And so it led to a lot of questions. One of the questions is, well, if the story isn't true, then where did they get the story from? And how did they come up with the story? And of course, one of the things I've tried to do is rationalize it and think about, were there actually historical people that might have inspired the story? So one person that I've suggested previously is that E.S. Ibn Kapisa may have been one of the historical people that may have inspired this mythology.
About
and as I'm sure you realize, that inspiring a story isn't the same thing as having a historical story. So, for example, say a story like Superman could have been inspired by a hero back in the early 20th century. But that's not the same thing as Superman being a real historical person.
Right. That's right.
So that's the background to.
Wonderful. So we have about 14 minutes, give or take. So I'm just giving you a hint as you can time yourself. But also, this is a teaser again. We're just doing a teaser right now. Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, so if we look at the ordinary world, the hero starts off in their ordinary world. If we take Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins is living in the peaceful Shire amongst a village of hobbits, and his good friend Gandalf enters the Shire to celebrate his uncle's birthday. Okay, so that's Lord of the Rings. And if we compare that to Muhammad, Muhammad is working as a merchant or trader. So in both cases, they start off in their ordinary world. Then we move on to the call to adventure. So Frodo was called to adventure by Gandalf when Gandalf entrusts him with the One Ring after Bilbo leaves the Shire. Do we have anything like that in the case of Muhammad? Well, in the case of Muhammad, he's visited by the angel Jibreel and is entrusted with a revelation. So this is a stereotypical mythological element. You know, it starts off ordinary life, and then the hero of the story is called on a certain adventure.
And Mill, Brother Mill, I want to clarify to people, you're not saying the story of Muhammad was borrowed from, the Hobbits or the story of the Lord of the Rings.
No.
You're showing just what a mythological story would look like.
Exactly. Yeah. I could have picked any one of hundreds of familiar stories and films and books. I'm just using Lord of the Rings as an example of how it might compare. I'm not saying that Muhammad's story is similar to Lord of the Rings. The of the story is pretty much the same. Yeah, it's a monomyth. So the third element is a refusal of the call. So in Lord of the Rings, Frodo refuses the call to adventure at first, not believing that a simple hobbit like himself can be entrusted. Do we have anything like that in the story of Muhammad? Yes, we do. Muhammad is terrified and squeezed several times. He attempts to commit suicide by throwing himself off the mountainside. And a direct quote from the CIRA, "I thought, woe to me, poet or possessed, never shall Quraysh say this of me. I will go to the top of the mountain and throw myself down that I may kill myself and gain rest." So that's perfectly in line with a typical mythological story.
Absolutely. I wish he did that. But all that to say is that, Mill is reporting real things about Muhammad, by the way. He's using the Lord of the Ring as just a mythical story, but he's using real things about the story of Muhammad, at least according to the Islamic tradition. Now, here is a prophet who says he wants to commit suicide because he wasn't so sure that he was actually called by God. That, in and of itself, tells you something. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah. Okay. So, of course, next element typically occurs meeting with the mentor. So our hero in the Lord of the Rings generally refuses the call in the beginning, either afraid of what will happen or satisfied with life as it is. And then someone like Gandalf appears to change the hero's mind and to bestow gifts and gadgets. This is the meeting with the mentor. So probably you can guess what it is for the case of Muhammad. So in the case of Muhammad, we have two mentors, if you like. So we have Bahira, who foretells his future when he's a young child, foreshadowing the later events. And then more importantly, you have Waraka ibn Nafal, who reassures him that it is the angel Jibreel. So he decides to accept the mission that he's given.
Yeah, through Waraka ibn Nawfal.
Met the mentor.
And Waraka ibn Nawfal, the cousin of Khadija, never actually believed in Muhammad as a prophet. I mean, that's even interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we have no evidence that this person ever existed. This is the thing. It seems credible a little bit, but then once you start comparing it with other works of fiction, you see that it is completely stereotypical.
Yeah, and you have Bahira, the priest, also the same thing, about the seal or the mark in his back. And again, the priest never believes in Muhammad, but somehow he was the reason why Muhammad should believe he's a prophet.
Exactly. Yeah. So, of course, the next big element in the story then is crossing the threshold. So Frodo and Sam cross out of the Shire. So this marks leaving the ordinary world and going into the extraordinary world. So how does that compare with Muhammad? Muhammad shares his revelations to his first followers. He confronts the people of Mecca. So he goes out of his comfort zone. He's basically telling the people about his experiences and sharing the revelation. This, again, hits the nail on the head in terms of the mythology.
Amen.
And number 6, you have tests, allies, and enemies. A story wouldn't be a story if you didn't have some opposition. So in case of Lord of the Rings, you have Frodo and his hobbit friends face the ring rats, for, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, for the first time on their way to meet with Gandalf at Bree. In the case of Muhammad, he gained few followers earlier on, and as his followers increased, people left town and businesses suffered. His followers were forced from the marketplace and starved. Those without protection were tortured and killed. So that's typical. You know, he met opposition, things were difficult. He had to, if you'd like, climb the metaphorical mountain to overcome all of these problems and difficulties.
That's right.
Okay. And then we get to 7. Approach to the inmost cave, the abyss. The Fellowship struggles to survive the journey through the mountains, but is forced into the mines of Moria. Frodo and Gandalf discuss Gollum and the dangers of the ring. So in the story of Muhammad, obviously there is an episode of the cave that features prominently when Jibreel arrives, but there's another equivalent cave, which is the companions of Muhammad go to Abyssinia.
That's right.
So
exactly.
Metaphorically, the companions of Muhammad seek temporary refuge in the inmost cave by migration to Abyssinia. Now, it's interesting that there is a curious coincidence in that Abyssinia begins with abyss, but that is purely a coincidence. There's no etymological link between the two words, but it's an interesting element.
Yes, and when you were
Which
saying
makes you
this, by the
wonder,
way,
was
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but when you're talking about his persecution, that's what came to my mind, the first migration to Abyssinia.
Yeah. And so, of course, it's a great element of the story. You know, he meets opposition and then they have to flee. And of course, this is a foreshadowing of the later migration known as the Hijra.
That's right.
So this all helps to bring the story together. It makes it a really gripping story. And, you know, most people will have only got these core elements. You know, this is the story that most Muslims will have heard. And because it works so well, all the elements fit together nicely, like every good story does. They will have shared it with their children, and they will have shared it with their friends and so on. So it works really well as a story. But that's all it is. It's a story. And then number 8, you have the Ordeal. So in Lord of the Rings, the orcs are alerted to the presence of the Fellowship with Moria. Frodo and his friends are forced to fend off hundreds, if not thousands, of orcs, as well as a cave troll. They defeat the cave troll, and just as the orcs are about to overrun them, their numbers are scattered as the Balrog appears. Okay, so what is the ordeal for Muhammad? Most people in Mecca either ignored him or mocked him as just another prophet. However, when his message condemned idol worship and polytheism, many of Mecca's tribal leaders began to see Muhammad and his message as a threat.
Right.
Mecca's merchants and leaders offered Muhammad incentives to abandon his preaching, but he refused. Increasingly, the resistance to Muhammad and his followers grew, and they were eventually forced to immigrate from Mecca to Medina, the Hijra. So that is like a real key turning point in the story, the Hijra. And we'll have noticed that in an earlier presentation that I did with you, that the beginnings of the Tayyaya kingdom happened in 718. Of course, according to Islamic tradition, it happened in 722. So that element doesn't quite fit historically, but it's interesting that this is a mythological element, this whole idea of a hijra in the first place.
Yes. And I don't know if you've ever looked into the fact that when Muhammad migrated, he and Abu Bakr, they hid in a cave and they had a spider basically web that protected them. I wonder if there is any mythical element here to other myth stories as well.
Yeah, I'd be curious actually to look that one up and just see if Joseph Campbell talks about that, because the version I'm giving is a kind of like a simplified version of his overall schema. I think he has 17 elements in total. I'm going to be just doing 12 of them, but I imagine there are probably elements like that in it. I'll have to look that one up.
Very good. I'm sorry.
So,
Keep going, brother, because we have about 4 minutes left. I don't want to delay you.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so next is the reward. So the fellowship is rewarded with its own bravery for surviving. Okay. And in the case of Muhammad, at Medina, the revelation of praying towards the Kaaba in Mecca came to him. So that's sort of a reward. And then the focus now on Mecca, which leads us into the return home of the hero. So we have the road back. So in Lord of the Rings, let me see. Saruman has created an army of Uruk-hai to hunt down and kill the Fellowship. Frodo wanders off on his own and is later confronted by Boromir. Boromir, seduced by the power of the ring, tries to take it from Frodo, but Frodo escapes. Now, in the case of Muhammad, in Medina, Muhammad united the tribes under the constitution of Medina, and that begins the road back to Mecca. So it fits like a glove. Number 11, the resurrection. In the case of Lord of the Rings, Frodo realizes that he must travel to Mordor alone. So resurrection here is metaphorical. It's when all things seem lost, the character, if you like, resurrects and wins the day. In the case of Muhammad finally returns to Mecca in victory, and it comes to him so easily.
Yes.
And then finally, 12, the hero returns. In the case of Lord of the Rings, Sam arrives at the shore as Frodo floats away in a boat. Frodo looks on with longing eyes, knowing that he must go on this adventure alone. However, Sam is having nothing of it. Despite not being able to swim, Sam lunges himself into the river in pursuit of his friend. When Frodo pulls Sam up into the boat, they're reunited. We've returned to where the adventure started, with Sam and Frodo venturing off on an adventure. So, in the case of Muhammad, we also have that return. Muhammad is back in Mecca, but now everyone accepts him. He destroys the pagan idols in Mecca and then sends his followers out to destroy all of the remaining pagan temples in Eastern Arabia. So we see that we have all 12 of the key mythological elements in the story of Muhammad. This, to me, suggests very strongly that this story was constructed so that each element fits perfectly and it flows in a typical mythological way. So that is essentially my argument. Of course, I will follow up in a later presentation on elements in the story that are clearly taken from other sources that further points out the idea that it's fictional.
Absolutely, and that's what I was going to ask. It'd be really interesting for us to look at some source material for such innovation, if you wish, or such at least addition to the story of Muhammad. And it's things like this, folks, start to make sense. Why you have a story of Muhammad that somehow fits a specific narrative, yet historically speaking, it's not really reliable because you do not find any evidence to support it. But fictionally speaking, it does work because, hey, whomever really invented it either edited it themselves or later work continued with embellishing it and making it look even smoother and smoother. Well, brother, our time is up, so thank you so much for this amazing, quick teaser research, obviously. So I'd love to have you back again. I'll be back here in our studios in May and also in June. So let's see if we can work out something based on your schedule, and we'll craft up a longer time this time, and we'll go from there. Yeah. Any last word for the people, if you want to tell them about something you're working on or something they need to check?
I'm looking at the idea at the moment that in the first century of Islam, the buildings that we think are mosques may not be mosques, but they may actually be Nestorian churches.
Wow!
So that's something I'm working on at the minute, and I'm finding really interesting evidence for that. And so even the mosques that we have that seem to be pointing to Petra, they may not even be mosques. They may be something else. They could be Nestorian churches. And I'm finding a lot of evidence for that in Chinese and now Tibetan sources. So that's something new that I'm discovering of late.
Very well. Thank you so much, brother. We appreciate you, and we definitely will circle back to you next time. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. By the way, this is the conclusion of our first part of our podcast, Let Us Reason. Now, for the next part, you're going to have me only, and I'm going to do some recaps with you. I want to entertain some of the questions that are worth entertaining, by the way. So if you're coming here to play the fool, if you're coming here to think like you can be a clown, I'll call you out publicly, and everybody will enjoy at least how I'm going to describe you, or enjoy at least the fact that we're going to block you. So if you want to have that honor, absolutely, this is the place for you. And if you have multiple accounts, guess what? I love it, because we're fleshing you out. That's what I call it. You are revealing to us your secrets, dirty secrets in this case, and we are just going to help YouTube actually block you, because they're not going to do the job for us, actually. We will do it for them. So here is what we are going to be doing in the next 24 minutes. I am going to start another live stream, and then we are going to basically entertain questions, and I'll keep sharing about some of the updates of things that have been done so far and upcoming stuff that we will be working on. So this is the conclusion then of our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'd like to welcome all of you into our second part of our live stream. And if you are listening to us on radio, this is part 2 of our podcast, Let Us Reason. Last time we had Brother Mill, who did an excellent job comparing the CIRA, or the biography of Muhammad, or some of the stories related to Muhammad, and presenting him as a hero, to a mythical story called, for instance, Lord of the Rings, and began to show the, from I think Joseph Campbell, he says, work, began to show 12 elements that made the Lord of the Rings story to be a mythical story, and how Muhammad's story also fits these elements. The fact that Muhammad basically was persecuted, the fact that he has to flee, the fact that he has to return as a hero, and so on and so forth. So this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy doing. But we will have also Brother Mill come back again in the near future to continue with presenting some of his research concerning the basically the historical criticism of Islam, and specifically Muhammad as a character and the life of Muhammad. So what we're going to be doing right now, first, like I said, I would like to begin to examine or look at least at some questions that are worth interacting with. And as I'm doing this, I'll keep updating you on things that have been done. So I would love to ask our amazing team here if they don't mind spotting a question for me, or if they like to scroll back up if we missed one. But all that to say is that we are here to try to entertain some questions from you. Hopefully these questions are relevant to some of the topics that we've been covering. For instance, we talked about Ramadan yesterday. We talked about fasting from our Islamic background. I had 2 former Muslims with me, Daughter of Christ and Brother Nasser. So if you have questions about that, let us know. We talked with also David Wood about Ramadan as a feast versus fasting. And even we brought up the topic of jihadis capitalizing actually on increasing their jihadi activities during Ramadan. David used to do a video series called Ramadan Bombathon intentionally, because he wants to show you that during this so-called holy month, which, by the way, the Quran never said that Ramadan is a holy month, actually the activities of killing others and fighting them increases. You can always get updates from a website called Islam, the Religion of Peace. Actually, it's called thereligionofpeace.com. Speaking about Islam, it talks about daily, terror activities that are committed by jihadis. And then we had also Brother Anthony Rogers, who did, as always, his amazing exegesis of the scripture to show us, in this time, the deity of Christ. We called it Christology, or Mark's Christology, meaning the divinity of Christ from the Gospel of Mark. And that was extremely important for us to focus on, simply because people sometimes assume that outside of the Gospel of John, you're really unable to prove that Jesus is divine in the other synoptic Gospels. Better yet, If you don't even go to the outside of the New Testament, you cannot even prove that Jesus is divine. In other words, if you go to Old Testament, you are going to be stuck with a completely different Messiah or a promise of a Messiah. Not to mention, of course, the idea that there is no Trinity and so on and so forth. All that to say is that we will do series like this with Anthony Rogers and Sam Shamoun and others to debunk these false claims and to equip the saints to be better off, at least in not only refuting but defending our faith and our doctrines. Okay, so if we have any questions, they told me that they are going to superimpose those questions for me. So what have we done this year? Well, first of all, we've done amazing, remodel to our studio. In fact, I'm hoping that sometimes today we will do the behind the scene, maybe for a few minutes to show you what's going on. Super basically advanced control room. I'm so thankful for the team, by the way. I never really push anyone to do anything. They are so graciously always thinking about enhancements and improvement. An amazing set that you can see behind me. Amazing guest speakers, of course, that we bring with us. And now we even have the capability of zooming them in. And if you've been watching some of our live streams with those who were not in studio with me, none of them was, you almost get the feel that they are at least sitting next to me, because we're trying to set it up as if it's a newsroom, as somebody commented yesterday. And that's exactly the intent behind what we're doing. So that's what's been going on. And we're always looking for ways, by the way, to continue to advance and enhance and improve. We're not going to settle with whatever we're doing, because we want to always give you the cutting edge when it comes to technology and equipment and camera work, videography, audio, setting, you name it. In fact, right now we are in the midst of initial discussions to plan for maybe an online conference being set up right here from our studio versus the one that I've done last year. We may end up doing both, doing the one that I've done last year and doing another special one from here from the studio. So we're exploring these ways. Why do we want to do this? Here's why, folks. I told you this before. I'm going to say it again. We want CIRA International channel to be your hub to come and learn. You want to learn about apologetic? We're your spot. You want to learn about historical criticism of Islam? We would like to be your stop shop for that. You want to learn about things specific related to, for instance, the Quranic manuscripts? We want to be that stop shop for you. You want to learn about tools to use to engage with Muslims and also to at least refute arguments? We want to be that location for you, that station. If you want to learn about how to understand the scripture, we want to be there for you. In fact, I do messages and sermons, and we have even our own online church called the King's Church, where we have our own YouTube channel. We welcome you to, of course, subscribe to it, but we have that kind of stuff and capabilities, and we do things in Arabic. For instance, in the last at least couple of trips, we've been recording a lot of Arabic material. We've been getting requests, actually, to go and do many of these amazing material that we've been doing, for instance, with Jay Smith, with Sam Shamoun and others, making it available for Arab speakers, whether from a Christian background or from a Muslim background, and even for Muslim seekers. So I've done a number of shows. For instance, I've done an Arabic show, or at least we began to record a show called Q&A with Fadi, where we take an argument in a form of a question by a Muslim, and then we refute that argument or respond to it. That's also an amazing tool to help those upcoming apologists or those who are former Muslims, followers of Jesus in the Arab world, to be able to use these responses to refute Islamic arguments, engage with their family and friends in these discussions, be equipped to know where we believe in what we believe in. Another one, Arabic show that we're working on, is to take everything that I'm doing with Jay Smith concerning the historical criticism of Islam, Mecca, Qibla, and also I started at least working on the textual criticism of the Quran by focusing on the early Quranic manuscript. You'll be surprised, folks, how many Muslims have no clue where to even look at a Quranic manuscript, not to mention the history of the Quranic manuscript, not to mention that there are corrections that are made to the Quranic manuscripts. In fact, Just in the last couple of days, I showed our audience when actually it's going to be published, which we have a Facebook page, by the way, called Nahj as-Sabil. Nahj as-Sabil. And we'll make sure that we put these descriptions and links on the description boxes for this particular live stream, where we are publishing our Arabic videos on an average of once a month. Our hope is to build a backlog to allow us to do once a week. That's the goal, but we are still in the early stages of doing so. I challenged our Muslim viewers who will be watching it to ask themselves this question. We have manuscript to show evidence of entire verses that have been deleted. Entire verses. How do we know that they were deleted? Because the manuscript shows evidence of deletion, but also what we're reading today is only what is left out of that deleted manuscript. So you have the word before things were deleted and the word after, and they were conjoined together. In other words, big sections been taken out. Who is making these decisions? Why are they making these decisions? I thought the Quran is preserved. I thought the Quran is not corrupted. I thought the Quran was revealed from heaven. Was the Quran revealed from heaven with that bigger section or the smaller section? The unedited version or the edited version? Who decided that the edited version is the inspired word of Allah? You see, these are the kind of things that we are doing to try to help our Muslim friends. As we are speaking, I am looking also to see if there is anything worth elaborating on. And on top of this, I've also done an Arabic show just to show to the Arab-speaking Muslims and the Arab world that the Apostle Paul is actually endorsed by Islamic sources. Why do I bring up the Apostle Paul? Well, if you're engaged with Muslims, you know always Paul is the fall guy for any accusations. He's accused of inventing the Trinity. He's accused of inventing his own version of Christianity. I love it when English-speaking Muslims say the Pauline Christianity. Whatever. That's my answer to it. And there is another Greek word that I like to use when I hear things like that. It's called baloney. Okay? So, all that to say is that we want to educate our Arab-speaking Muslims, but at the same time, you all know my passion is for the English-speaking Muslims who don't have a clue what the Arabic Islamic sources say. So we're here to serve you free, by the way. We're not charging people. I discovered that there are channels sometimes on websites that charge people actually to have access to some material. You know what? We're having it available for you. When we're asking you to support us, we're not telling you you have to. We're encouraging you. We want to serve the Lord faithfully, and we want to glorify His name. And in doing so, we want to help you get over that hump called Islam and come over to Jesus. Only Christ can set you free. Now, let me stop here, and I'm going to start looking. So somebody's asking, Aisha is saying, where do I publish my Arabic videos? Like I said, for now, we're publishing the Arabic videos on a Facebook page called Nahj as-Sabil. We'll make sure the link is available. We're working with the team, this team in the Middle East, to also begin to utilize my Arabic YouTube channel. We have a channel in Arabic, by the way. It has, I think, about 17 or 18 videos. And it's the translation, the Arabic translation of CIRA International called Qanat as-CIRA ad-Dawliya. If you speak in Arabic, that's why I'm saying it in Arabic for those who can understand it. You'll find it, and we're still in the process of figuring out how we can promote it in a, I should say, in a way that can draw people to it. Now, one of the amazing things about the team that I work with, at least here in the English stuff, they're the one who helped me with the Arabic channel, by the way. We don't believe in promoting our work by paying Facebook and YouTube and Google and bringing false, basically, characters just to, just to show that we have that many views. No, no, no. We want every single thing to be organic. What do I mean? Real conversations, real followers, real subscribers, real friends of our Facebook page. By the way, my Facebook page have 5,000 friends all the time. Even when we drop one or two, when we block them, we allow others. There's a long list of people. I think the last I looked at, it's more than 100 requests to be friends. But you can always follow. my personal Facebook page, alfadi.CIRA, here's another thing you can do. You can always follow my other page called The Al-Fadi, and we have a ministry page on Facebook called CIRA International. We also have an online church page called The King's Church, and I have connections with a number of groups on Facebook. Then we have our YouTube channel, CIRA International, where we highly encourage you to subscribe to it. Guess what? Yesterday we hit 65,000, and it seemed like in the next couple of days we may even hit 66,000. Folks, we started it 2020, back in January of 2020, before the COVID pandemic hit, with about 26,000 subscribers. We came a long way to where we are today. And we started it this year with about 53 to 54,000 subscribers just in January of 2021. So we're thankful for all the work that this amazing team is doing. Thankful for you for spreading this information around, for encouraging people to subscribe to us. One of the things that you know that I do almost on a weekly basis, which is my own live stream that I do from our home office studio, where I bring amazing people like Sam Shamoun. We do a lot of late nighters, Q&A with Sam Shamoun. I'll start doing also a Q&A with Anthony Rogers. And we are going to bring in a number of ex-Muslims to continue with our series on ex-Muslims sharing their journey to Christ. So these are some of the updates that I wanted to share with all of you, whether you're listening to us on radio at Let Us Reason podcast or you are watching right now. With that in mind, let me see if there are any questions. David Medina, you're saying the Quran claims that Jesus did not actually die. It just appeared that way in chapter 4, verse 157. In the Bible, Jesus says that one who claims that Jesus would not die on the cross is none other than Satan himself. Well, that is true statement about, of course, Jesus, of course, rebuked his apostles. In fact, he rebuked Peter when he told the Lord, heaven forbid, Lord, that something like this would happen to you. And Jesus looked at him and says, get behind me, Satan. In other words, it's Satan, as our brother is saying here, is the one who is trying to thwart that idea. Satan even tried, by the way, when he entered into Judas to try to thwart the plan of God when they were at the upper room celebrating the Passover feast in John 13. You read about that, and also you can read about it in the other synoptic gospels. All that to say is that, amazingly, the Quran that claims to be sent by the same God and it was revealed to the false prophet of Islam through an angel called Gabriel. Somehow Gabriel forgot about everything in the Bible and began to give false accounts. Now, I did an entire video series. I can't remember how many. I want to say close to 20 videos on refuting this one lonely, sorry verse in the Quran in chapter 4, verse 157, that makes this outrageous claim that Jesus was never crucified. I would show that even the structure of a verse is laughable, actually. Doesn't even refute the crucifixion, not to mention, of course, the debacle in that verse, as always, of course. What do you expect? When you go there, that's all you're going to expect, obviously. And then we did the same thing in Arabic because intentionally I wanted our Arab Muslims to benefit from the same material because they don't have the capacity, unfortunately, to go to resources and ask questions because they're going to be intimidated by this authority. They are going to be attacked. They are going to be threatened. So we want to give them a safe haven to do so. Anne Ryan, our amazing moderator, says, Al-Fadi, can I ask a question? Absolutely. If the devil is locked up in hell, why is there evil around still? And why do they go and stone him? Yeah, so Anne is talking actually about an interesting event that takes place during the Great Pilgrimage, the fifth pillar of Islam. That's the mega pilgrimage, or the bigger pilgrimage. We have a minor and a major one. And it takes about 10 days, give or take, between the arrival and the celebration of Eid al-Adha, which is the feast of sacrifice to commemorate what Abraham was going to do with his son. And then they go to Mecca after they slaughter, of course, the lamb, and they then go back to a place called Mina. And for 3 days, if they can do that, or they can ask someone to do it on their behalf, believe it or not, they go to a pillar and they stone that pillar 7 times with 7 pieces of stone. Now, there are so many theories about this, but the idea is that Satan has been locked in there and they're stoning him because he's the cause of their misery. A little that they forgot that the God of Islam is the author of that misery. But then if you say why, they'll say, well, when Abraham was taking his son on a 3-day journey, interesting, but that's exactly what the Bible says, that Satan was trying to entice him not to do this and sacrifice his son, so he was stoning him, and now it's being done to commemorate this. Now, Jay Smith recently have done a video to show that it used to be 1 pillar, but then they added 3. I mean, one theory is that 1 pillar, doing it 3 days in a row, making 3 now to kind of like help people at least space it out a little bit. So that's my answer to that. It's an act of idolatry, to say the least. I have about 3 minutes left for my radio podcast, folks, but I'll stay around after we conclude that. So let me see if there's any other question. CTDTX, well, that's a full mouthful of names, by the way. Al-Fadi, can you put your future glasses, think out loud, that all this research about Petra, which is, original Mecca possibly, and doubts about existence of Muhammad between 570 and 632 will lead us to where? Absolutely. Here is what it will lead us to. We need to start publishing officially articles to show that these findings can lead to an entirely different history about Islam. And in doing so, more and more Muslims will flock out of Islam and come to Christ. You see why your role is important, CT? You can spread the knowledge. You can share it on your Facebook page, or you can share it on your YouTube channel. You can share it with other trusted friends. And that's how more and more Muslims will become more challenged. That's why I'm getting requests to do it in Arabic, because apparently some Muslims heard about it and they want to know more. But now I am a former Muslim from Saudi who's shared with them. If somebody who is not a former Muslim from Saudi, for instance, or from the Arab world, they can start casting doubts about him. But we want them to have access to these things. Still have 2 minutes left. Let me see if there's any more questions. Maddie Andrews saying, in your opinion, was Muhammad based on a real person or complete myth? I would say, this is my opinion, there was a person, whether his name was Muhammad or not, because you can argue that Muhammad is a title, actually, not just a name. And maybe this person wasn't really whom we think he is today. The character has been embellished, started at something totally different than what we have today. Or maybe he did some of the things, but not all of the things. So that's where I come from, because it's hard really to discount completely the existence of a character that supposedly people have followed. Now, that's where the research of Mel and the work that we're doing, with Dr. J. Smith will come in handy. So that's my answer to that. Let me see if there's any more questions. Thank you very much for the golden belt information. So I cannot be deceived by Muslims. That's Blackstone Kisser. Okay, I like your name. I mean, that's the idea. Really, I mean, I'm not doing this for us just to refute Muslims, but hopefully that for you to share with Muslims and see if you can reason with them. Ashuristan saying, Al-Fadi, did the pre-Islamic Arabs really kill their baby daughters? You know what? It's not just the pre-Islamic Arabs. There's so many stories about other dynasties that did this. So whether that happened or not, that's not the case, to argue. That doesn't make Muhammad to be a true prophet anyway, because I know where you're coming from. Probably you've heard a Muslim telling you that this is why God sent Muhammad to rescue these baby kills. And if he did this, if indeed it happened, good for him. But that doesn't make him a true prophet in the first place. So that's why we want to be careful with that. With that in mind, I want you to hang tight and wait a little bit. I'm going to conclude our podcast. This is Al-Fadi, and this is the conclusion of this week's podcast of Let Us Reason. That was a recap of things that has been done so far by way of improvements, enhancements, and also publications and production of new video series. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and consider to become a Patreon patron. As always, we thank you for your hard work. This is Al-Fadi over and out. God bless you all. All right, everyone. I'm going to stay in this live stream for 2 more minutes if there is any questions for me, simply because I want to also give the team some time to also take a breather. We've been going at it for a while here. So if you have any specific question, please send it my way. Esther is saying, is it true that some stories about Lord Jesus in the Quran are taken from Apocrypha? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you one quick story. The idea that Jesus created from clay or mud images of birds and he breathed into them and they became alive comes from an Apocrypha writing called the Gospel of James. That was rejected by the church, by the way, but it's an Apocrypha writing called the Gospel of James. Now, maybe Jesus did do something like this, but we don't find it in the Bible. The idea is it's been borrowed from an extra biblical source, and that in and of itself should be damaging to the credibility of the God of Islam, the messenger of Islam, and the book of Islam known as the Quran. Let me see if there is any other things that I can look at. So we have Craig Mueller saying, excuse me, Mr. Al-Fadi, you have replaced one religion with another. No, I did not, Craig. Excuse me, Craig. You don't have a clue what you're talking about, Craig. I tell you why. Because I didn't replace a religion with a religion. I replaced a false religion with a restored relationship with my Savior. Relationship. Listen to my testimonies and the testimony of ex-Muslims, especially from my background. We don't talk about religion. Maybe you think we are following a religion. So I'm sorry that you're being misled to think this way. Let's see if there is any other questions that worth also interacting with. Christian King saying, Brother Al-Fadi, God bless you all. Thank you. Can you make a show about Islam's prophet coming under the false prophet's bad fruits prophecy by Jesus, since most of his disciples, Sahaba basically, and Tabi'een fought and killed? Well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I can do something like that on my own, or maybe we'll have someone that join me. Me and Sam, by the way, have done a number of shows on things related to that. Me and David did a number of shows that show signs that Muhammad is a false prophet. But maybe we'll try to do a show. I think maybe I'm thinking Sam marks to show that Muhammad is a false prophet. And I'll take one more question before we wrap this thing up. Kyle Meyer says, when witnessing to Muslims, what is something to focus on that will be most likely to get through to them? You know, Kyle, I wish I can tell you there is this magic word or magic step or magic tool. You're going to have to try, by the guidance of the Holy Spirit. But I would always say, focus always on sin and atonement of sin and salvation and the need for eternal life and salvation, basically. That's what I would like you to do all the time. That's what I would like you to do all the time. And, some Muslims are more thinkers. So maybe you want to interact with them. Maybe you want to interact with them about, some apologetic issues. Other Muslims really, they take it for granted what they believe in. And that's the one that you want to pray for and share about sin and salvation. And there are those in between that will use scientific evidence and anything else. So you're going to have to really learn about that person, what they like, what they dislike, but keep it always focused on Jesus, regardless of how you do it. And remember to pray for any of them that the Lord put in your heart. In fact, remember to pray for the Muslim world right now as they celebrate the month of Ramadan, because we want them to stop this relational fasting from knowing the real truth and coming to Christ. And we have a babbler here by the name of Salam Daim. He's saying, may God guide you and bring you back to the deen of truth or the religion of truth. Salam, I have received my eternal past. Why do you say that your heart is broken for me? You should celebrate that I left the bondage of your wicked religion and the bondage of your slave owner, the false prophet, into the hands and the arms of my Lord who set me free. Did you read the Bible yourself before you start attacking people? Obviously you didn't. That's what a slave does, by the way. Babbles like a parrot. Okay? That's what you're doing. You're parroting, my friend. Go and read the Bible. You have it in Arabic. Read about Jesus. Well, by the time you finish reading about Jesus, Muhammad will look nothing compared to him. That's my advice to you. folks, I must wrap it up. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us here. Hopefully you've enjoyed these live streams. My prayer to you is that you would use this to share it with our Muslim friends. We want them to know the Lord, and share it with others. Spread the knowledge everywhere you go. And a mega thank you for our amazing moderators. And I know Sister Gedalia carried this burden most of the time today, so I'm so thankful for you. I know others have a different time zone. That's why they weren't able to join us. Thank you so much, everyone. This is Al Fadi, over and out. God bless.